Some people want to live in your classic, very, very, very fine house, 2 cats in the yard. But other folks, they like their homes less traditional.
We've met a lot of people that are, have their children and they homeschool and they work from their RVs. I've seen some people with like 4 or 5 kids. No, you guys are crazy. But, some people can do that.
Coming up, it's the cost of RV living. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm Paul Haverstrood. This is The Cost of Living. On the show today, it's questions and answers. Like, how much would it cost to live full-time in an RV? And what's going on with non-alcoholic drinks? Why are they so expensive? They don't have any booze, so what exactly are you paying for? You also asked a question about Canadian imports. Why do we buy stuff from other countries that we can make here? To answer that, we need to go all the way back to the 19th century and check in with a super cool economist named David Ricardo. And speaking of other countries, if you're thinking about taking a trip, going to another country, well, our first question today, it could be for you.
Hello, this is Michelle Rigby from Toronto, Nova Scotia. I have a question. When I travel to another country and use a credit card there, the reader always asks me if I want to pay in local currency, like say if I'm in Europe, if I want to pay in euros or in Canadian dollars. Which one will ultimately cost me less?
Jennifer Keene, you like to travel. You've been a few places. Have you run into what Michelle's talking about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. This is becoming really common. Usually I try not to think about what I'm spending when I'm traveling, and I save the crying for when I get home.
Well, why ruin a good time?
Exactly. But what Michelle is talking about is called dynamic currency conversion. So this is when you pay with a card, and the machine gives you a couple of options, like you can pay in euros, or, as she says, you can pay in Canadian dollars.
And then what happens? It just converts on the machine right there. It says, hey, this is your price in Canadian?
Yeah. I guess the advantage of it is that it's just easier to track your spending. You don't have to do the math in your head and work out what that price is worth in Canadian dollars. But, of course, everything has a price, Paul.
Right, and this is really Michelle's question, isn't it? What is that price? Is it cheaper to take that conversion, see the Canadian dollars, or pay in the local currency?
Yeah, so I called Brent Reynolds for his take on this. He's the president of Payson Solutions. He's worked in financial services for 2 decades, and here's his advice.
Always, always, always pay in the local currency, because when they're offering you that choice, they're charging a much higher fee than anything your credit card will be charging you.
Well, he's very definitive about that, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Well, he mentioned fees. What kind of fees is he talking about?
That's really up to the payment processor, but it can be anywhere from 5% to 10% on top of the price.
And that's going to be on your whole bill?
Mm-hmm.
So say you paid your hotel stay that way, they could tack on an extra 10% just for making the conversion?
Yeah, you could end up paying hundreds of dollars more.
Well, that doesn't seem cool.
No, and they are supposed to be upfront about those fees, but sometimes there are fees that get bundled into the exchange rate, and the exchange rate may not be the best. So what you're actually paying in Canadian versus what the price is in the local currency, that can be hard to understand.
That's probably a feature, not a bug, that it's not transparent. But yeah, it's not very transparent.
That's why a lot of experts, even the Government of Canada on its travel webpage, all recommend that you pay in the local currency.
Okay, but let's say you do that. You still pay something, right? There is still a foreign transaction fee whenever you're dealing with changing money this way and that way?
Yeah, most credit cards are going to charge you 2.5%.
Can I cut that out?
Yeah, you can get credit cards that don't charge foreign transaction fees, but you may need to earn a certain income to qualify for them. And you'll have to pay a higher than normal annual fee usually. So, you got to consider whether that's worth it.
You really have to value, if you're traveling a few times a year, is it worth spending whatever that credit card fee is or bank account fee to have it? Is it worth it? That's where you kind of have to look at your own budget and see if it makes sense.
Jennifer Weatherhead is a travel journalist who lives in Toronto. She spends about half the year jetting around the world. So she thinks a lot about how to save money.
And she must have tips.
Yeah, she uses a prepaid debit card that is specifically designed for travel. And there are a few Canadian options. One is the EQ Bank card. She uses the Wise card. It allows you to preload it with Canadian money and then convert it at any time, either before you leave or while you're traveling. So it's a card loaded with foreign currency, which means you can spend like a local when you're there.
That gelato is €5. I'm going to tap it. It's €5 gone from my bank account. It's not €5 exchanged into $7.25 and then like a $3 transaction fee on top of it.
Now, there is a small fee every time you use it, but it's less than traditional credit cards.
Okay, but what if I wanted to go old school and just use cash? Like I go to the bank before I leave for the trip, withdraw a whole bunch of cash, and then just go to that country with like a boodle of bills in my pocket.
I mean, of course, it's always good to have a bit of cash, maybe not a boodle of cash. The bank is going to give you a better exchange rate if you want to do that than if you go to one of those places at the airport. And then, of course, you can find ATMs most places in the world, but you're going to pay for that too. Like if you take out foreign currency, your bank is going to charge you an exchange fee. And then there can be a cost for using the ATM.
So that machine's probably going to take a fee. And then your bank might also charge you a fee as well on the other side. So I've had that happen before where, I just take out some money somewhere and then I come back and I'm like, that just cost me an extra $15.
I talked to another travel expert who was in London recently, and he told me he went into a grocery store to use the ATM there. It was going to charge him almost 20% to take out £100.
I would loathe that if that happened to me. Like if I was in a rush and I ended up paying that afterwards, I would think about it and it would eat me up.
I get it. It would be the worst, but it can happen so easily. Luckily, he knew enough that that was an outrageous price and he canceled it. But this brings me to Jennifer's final piece of advice.
Which is?
She says, take a few minutes before you go. Figure out what the dollar is worth wherever you're going in the world, even if you just have a rough idea.
Just knowing kind of how to calculate that exchange rate in your head as you're spending, I think will help keep you a little bit more on track than if you just go into it blindly and you're like, I don't know, in Sweden, and you're like, I have no idea what 3,500 krona is, but sure, take my money.
Hey, sometimes you just got to have those lingonberry pancakes at any price.
Well, yeah, lingonberry is delicious. Worth it.
You know what? I don't care what the smorgasbord costs. Put it on the Visa. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
Our next question is from Mayank in Etobicoke, Ontario. He wants to know how much it would cost to live full-time in an RV. Now, Danielle Nerman, she's not a big road tripper, but Mayank, for you, of course she went all #RV life.
Hello, come on in.
Connie Whitman is showing me around her RV. It's 35 feet long with a bedroom in the back, and the kitchen has black appliances and brushed gold fixtures.
We have a full-size shower.
3 years ago, Connie, her husband, and her 2 dogs sold their house and most of their stuff and moved into this RV.
We retired when we were 55. We were very lucky. And we just decided that we wanted to travel more than invest all of our income into a home.
And they've been everywhere, man.
We started from Nova Scotia and went all down the eastern seaboard to the Florida Keys, back up through Alabama, Texas.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo.
They live in their RV year-round, so they don't pay property taxes and they don't have a power bill. But they still have expenses, like their cell phones, internet, and insurance. Because when you live in a travel trailer,
there's hail, there's storms. We had a couple scares when we were in the Florida Keys. But luckily, the worst that came of it was all the iguanas were blown out of the tree.
But the biggest item in their budget is parking. RV campgrounds can charge as much as $300 a night. Some of them are really bougie and have spas and infinity pools. Connie says you can spend as much or as little as you like. This summer, Connie and her husband spent nothing on accommodations. They worked at a campsite near Stony Plain, Alberta, and got a free spot to park their RV. They're also members of something called Harvest Hosts. It's a community of businesses, like breweries and golf courses, that welcome overnight RVers.
And they allow you to stay there for free and ask that maybe you support them in whatever they are. So come in and sample their beers, or it could be winery or a farm market or anything like that.
And then there's boondocking, going totally off-grid.
Boondocking essentially is self-contained camping, sometimes known as primitive camping.
Chuck Price runs a website called Boondock or Bust. He says if you're going to do this, it helps to have a generator or solar panels. But if you're prepared, he says there's plenty of free crown land where RVers can hunker down for long stretches. But first things first, you need an RV. And the price for that can range between $5,000 and $500,000. Now, if you already own a house and sell it, Chuck says you can buy an RV outright and still have money in the bank. But before you do that, think about this. A house is an asset that over time usually appreciates in value. An RV is a vehicle. And just like a car, it depreciates the minute you drive it off the lot.
Now that RV that is worth a couple $100,000 is going to be worth next to nothing 10 years from now. So it is a huge, huge mistake for people to not take that into consideration.
Connie did consider that before she hit the road, and she has zero regrets. She's met a lot of great people and seen a lot of places. But there have been some sacrifices.
I think the hardest part was deciding what shoes to keep. Because when you have a household as a woman, my closet was full of shoes.
For The Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
This is a pumpkin-spiced edition of The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Haverstrood. Our next question is about booze, or at least kind of.
Hi, this is Keitha. So I'm a pretty active person, and I don't always like to drink. I've been trying some more non-alcoholic options, but I've always wondered, why are they often the same price as the real thing? They don't have alcohol, but they're just as pricey. What's up with that?
Leah Hendry, you do see a lot more booze-free drinks out there these days, don't you?
Yeah, you do. The low alcohol industry has really exploded. In just 1 year, so that's between 2023 and 2024, non-alcoholic drink sales went up by nearly 25% in Canada. And a lot of the big-name breweries are producing non-alcoholic versions of their drinks. It's becoming a more important part of their business, especially since Gen Z are drinking less than previous generations.
Yeah, from what you hear, the kids, they don't like to get as boozy, which will probably save them some hangovers. You'd think it would also save them some money?
Well, alcohol-free drinks are typically a bit cheaper, but not as much as you might expect. Prices vary between provinces, but it might only be $2 or $3 less to buy the non-alcoholic version. Here in Quebec, 6 bottles of Corona Cero cost about $1 less than the real deal.
Well, that's hardly any discount at all. And this is really the question, isn't it? When you buy a drink, it feels like you're paying for the booze. So how can you pay almost the same price when you're not getting the booze?
You can blame science.
Okay, why science?
Because removing the alcohol from a drink, it takes science, and science isn't cheap. The bigger breweries like Corona or Heineken, they use a process called vacuum distillation for their 0% beers.
All right, tell me about this process.
Well, during the brewing process, non-alcoholic beer gets boiled. So that's just like a regular beer. But non-alcoholic beer, it also gets put in a vacuum. So what this does is lower the pressure. That lowers the boiling point of alcohol from like 80 degrees to 35. And that gently evaporates off the alcohol. This process, it actually gets rid of the booze, but it preserves the flavor.
But of course, when you add steps, that adds costs.
Yeah, it is expensive. It adds an extra step to the normal brewing process. It's slower, there are energy costs, and you may still have to add in some extra flavor.
Which, ding, 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 another expense.
Exactly, and that's just one way to make a non-alcoholic beer. Matthew Gagnon makes a bunch of these beers. They're all under 0.5%. He runs a microbrewery called the Sober Carpenter in Quebec. His low-alcohol beers have all the same ingredients as you'd find in a normal beer, but to get the alcohol out, they use a process called arrested fermentation.
We stop the fermentation very aggressively by crashing the temperature so that the yeast can't continue to convert sugars into alcohol. So we bring our fermenters to 0 degrees Celsius, basically, just above freezing.
I gotta tell you, I kind of dig how this is turning into an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yeah, I mean, science is just one reason the price is what it is. The other one is while non-alcoholic booze is becoming more popular, the demand still isn't there for these huge production runs. So stuff like packaging, it still costs a lot.
So that packaging cost is more expensive. We're not doing 250,000 cans of a beer every time we run it. We're doing very small batches because the demand is not there yet. It's a growing market. But I think as the market grows and there's more demand, hopefully costs come down a bit.
Okay, so small batches, expensive science, all of that adds up to higher prices, even if you're not getting the booze.
Yeah, and there's also something else that's going on here. The psychology of pricing. You know, beer makers want you to see this product as being as good as the real deal. David Soberman teaches marketing at the University of Toronto.
If you want something to be perceived as a substitute, then you need the price to be quite similar, or people will perceive it to be different. Or it could be perceived as being lower quality and not very good if it was like 1/3 the price.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is really kind of along the same lines as luxury pricing.
Right. You want to keep the price high so people see it as a great product. And David says keeping prices on par with regular beer, that actually encourages manufacturers to make a better quality beer. They have to make it taste good or they're just not going to be able to justify that price.
They are motivated then to make a product that tastes as close as possible to the alcoholic version because that's what people want. And at the same time, people perceive it to be a viable alternative.
So he's pretty much saying, hey, you get what you pay for.
What you're paying for, though, is more than just the drink. Jordan LaBelle studies food marketing at Concordia University. He says certain costs are the same, whether there's alcohol in there or not.
The cost of getting these products to market are just as high as the alcoholic version. So you've got to pay for the ingredients. You've got to pay for the bottles, the shipping, the access to shelves.
Jordan says all those things would account for 60 to 75% of the price. And there's also a real push on right now to get people drinking non-alcoholic drinks. Take Heineken's 0% beer. They brought on Formula One racing champ Max Verstappen to promote their beer, and he definitely does not come cheap. They're also trying to convince liquor boards and grocery stores to carry it, and that adds a lot of marketing costs. But what they're doing, it's working. Non-alcoholic beer is hot and gaining new followers. And let's not forget, these companies want to make a profit.
When something is popular and in demand, you don't necessarily lower the price, right?
Hey, if the industry knows people will pay up for non-alcoholic drinks, then they're going to keep charging what they can.
Exactly. You're not going to be saving any pennies here, and the interest doesn't seem to be slowing down.
And that is how you get champagne prices for non-alcoholic beer. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, Paul.
My name is Marie-Ève. I live in Squamish, BC. And I've always wondered why countries seem to import resources they also produce and export. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We've actually been asked this question a few times. Why does Canada buy stuff from other countries that we also make? And yeah, it's curious. We have a ton of oil and wheat. We make wine. We grow apples. But we also import all that stuff. To properly answer why we do this, we need to take a trip back in time to the early 19th century. That's when a British economist named David Ricardo came up with a theory called comparative advantage.
Comparative advantage is one of the most important ideas in economics. That is undeniably true, yet not obvious to intelligent people.
Zara Liaquat is an economist at Wilfrid Laurier University. And she says, yeah, a lot of smart folks struggle to understand comparative advantage. It's been called Ricardo's difficult idea.
The basic idea is this. So even if a country is better at making everything, it still benefits from international trade as long as it focuses on what it does best relative to everything else that it could be doing. Imagine you're a brilliant surgeon who is also a really fast typist. So you could do your own typing, maybe even faster than your assistant, but it's better to focus on surgery and let someone else type for you. Even if they're slower, your time is more valuable in the operating room. And that's comparative advantage.
If we think about this idea in terms of countries, let's say, hypothetically, Canada was better than Mexico at producing cars and wheat. We're efficient. Maybe we used fewer workers, so it took us less time to make a car and grow a bushel of wheat. We'd have an absolute advantage in doing both things. But Zara says we'd still need to ask ourselves this.
What are we relatively better at? So if we are way more productive at growing wheat than we are at building cars, then that's where our comparative advantage lies. So Canada would specialize in wheat production, and Mexico would specialize in making cars, and then they trade with each other by producing surplus of what their local customers need.
And if we did that, we leaned into our comparative advantage, then Ricardo's theory says
each country would end up with more wheat, more cars than if they tried to make both themselves. So the overall production combined in both countries actually goes up, and we end up making better use of limited resources. Even prices may go down for customers in both countries. So everyone's happy.
Canada and Mexico only have so many workers and so many resources. By specializing, we don't spread ourselves too thin. Then we trade and both countries end up better off. That's the thinking anyway. The idea of Ricardian comparative advantage really took center stage in the 80s. That's when globalization and free trade kicked into high gear. And in a lot of ways, things played out like Ricardo said they would. Countries specialized in what they did best, and then we traded for what we didn't make. Many countries, including Canada, got wealthier. So Ricardo was right, but he wasn't entirely right. Not everyone won under globalization. Some workers didn't prosper like Ricardo promised. Their jobs were outsourced to other countries. Now, Trump's tariffs are, in part, a reaction to that. And this is where things get less theoretical. Because if you look at what's happening with global trade right now, the cracks in Ricardo's ideas are starting to split open.
The theory of comparative advantage assumes a world where countries would trade freely and specialize and everybody gains. But the Trump-era tariffs and these moves towards protectionism expose where that theory now struggles. Trade is no longer just about efficiency or productivity. It's about resilience and national security and strategic interaction between countries. So the entire premise of free trade and minimum government intervention no longer applies.
So where does this leave Canada? Well, we're a trading nation. We benefit from comparative advantage. But we also like to trade just because of geography. We're a big country. If you're in BC, why wouldn't you trade with Washington State? It's cheaper to ship stuff there than to Quebec. You can apply that same idea to the oil industry. It costs a lot to move oil around. So the industry, over the last 100 years, built up the infrastructure that made economic sense. It has pipelines that take Alberta crude to Texas refineries, while other pipes bring natural gas from Pennsylvania to Ontario. That's how Canada can be an oil and gas superpower and also import the stuff all at the same time. What makes this question and the idea of Ricardian comparative advantage so relevant is what's happening right now around the world. The conversation around global trade is changing fast. Canada is asking questions like, do we need to build more stuff here? And also, can we?
Theoretically, it is possible to produce everything that we need within our national borders. Yes, it is possible.
But Zara says there would also be trade-offs. A big one is variety. Our system of global trade lets us eat mangoes and pineapples in the winter. You want to buy a car? Take your pick. Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford. Now think about what it would take to make something like an all-Canadian cell phone, manufacturing all those little parts, using Canadian workers, and what that would cost.
So if you try to make everything yourself from scratch, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And frankly, not making the best use of world's limited resources. It's going to require a lot of time to develop those skills, build the necessary infrastructure to try to manufacture everything yourself. And at the end of the day, it's the consumers who will be paying for it.
Canada isn't about to entirely reject Ricardo's ideas, but Zara says they are being dragged into the 21st century. This country may end up with a variety of trade strategies. We could bring back some manufacturing, maybe dabble in some of our own trade protectionism, but also champion free trade when that makes sense.
Ricardo taught us a long time ago that everybody would be better off when they specialize and trade and focus on making or doing what they're good at. Sure, the Trump-era tariffs showed us that trade is not just about economics. It's about power, politics, people's lived experiences. And if we want to preserve the gains from trade, we have to update Ricardo's ideas to fit a world where income inequality and resilience matters, national security matters, just as much as efficiency. But at the end of the day, it still boils down to who is relatively more efficient.
If David Ricardo were alive today, he would probably say, I don't know, maybe trade protectionism, gadzooks. Also, indoor plumbing. What is this sorcery? So, thanks for that question, Mariev, and everyone who asked a question, big thanks to all of you as well. That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Leah Hendry, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Jeff Kynock. Oh, and if you have a minute, the CBC has a survey. It's in our podcast description. You can just click on the link if you feel like filling it out. Appreciate it. Talk to you next week. I'm Paul Haverstrood.